see. There's no audio. There we go. So everybody bear with me for the next couple of minutes. We about to call the professor. Um, go, go. All right, everybody. Can everybody hear? All right, cool. We are, this is the first stream of many. Right now, we're just trying to iron out a couple of details here. All right, perfect, perfect. We got an interesting show for y'all, man. This is episode one. By episode two, we're gonna have a lot more, stuff ready for you. Like the visuals are gonna be on point, particularly because right now we got this problem with the camera setting, right? So we're gonna hurry up and get the camera setting straight. But let's go ahead and call the professor. I'm saying. So this guy Eric Prince, right? This guy Eric Prince is a Navy SEAL officer, and he decided that he thinks he should recolonize Africa because we're incapable of governing ourselves, right? And that's a real interesting take. That's a hot take. That's a bold take to say. But as someone who is skilled in warfare, I wonder where his opinion comes from, right? On the other side, you have someone like Ibrahim Traore who's also skilled in warfare over there trying to forge a totally different path with you know, Mali. And that's such a interesting thing because we've never seen that in the modern era in Africa before, right? Um, so I have a couple of thoughts on it before we call the professor in, and get some expert opinions on some stuff. Um, but give me a couple of moments to attend to the sound, and then we'll hop right into it. Thank everybody for coming. Shout out Q, shout out Selena, shout out Ted, shout out everybody who's in here. All right, let's go ahead on and make this phone call. Um, but you know, as you all know, Dr. Joshua Kavuva is he's a real smart guy. He's also my father. I tend to call him whenever I have questions about the content. And let's go ahead on and give him a call. We've been talking about Africa's trajectory politically and what's going on in West Africa, South Africa, East Africa, and how they're relating to the powers that be, right? And before we get to the main event topic of Eric Prince claiming that he has the, know-it-all to recolonize Africa, I want to discuss a little bit around the whole climate in general. So let's go ahead on and call the professor. Hello?
Hello?
Hey, Sasa.
Mzuri.
So, we're live, and I told everybody the professor's coming in. So, just go ahead on and introduce yourself first before we get into it.
How do I introduce myself?
Well, are you saying that because I should give you a grand introduction?
Yes, I mean, you, the one who knows how I need to introduce myself.
All right,
Whenever I
no problem.
introduce myself,
Well, this guy Joshua Musembi Kivuva, Dr. Joshua Musembi Kivuva, who got his doctorate at Gispia at the University of Pittsburgh, and went on to study and teach and become a professor at Nairobi University as well, in the IDS department. And somebody who has an incredible resume when it comes to publications and uh, lectures, and just time really studying aspects of the political sphere in Africa, specifically subjects like devolution, and post-colonial governments. So this is somebody who really knows what he's talking about. Man, somebody I've agreed and disagreed with my whole life, and I'm excited to get your opinion on stuff. So we were just introducing the Democratic menu, and I was wondering if you could, talk a little bit about that.
ask a specific question.
So you stated Africa does not have a democratic menu per se for how they are to run their countries after colonial influence. For example, there's no Federalist Papers, quote unquote, for Burkina Faso. There's no uh, solid declaration, right, for Burkina Faso, and they're forging these alliances with countries like Mali. They've kicked out countries like the French. Why is a democratic menu important for the development of the country or the development of a government or regime? What should that look like, and why should they care about having a democratic?
They should not. I want to categorically tell you that there is not a single country in the world that has ever developed as a democracy. Every single country in the world developed as a dictatorship. It was a strong man for a few countries. It was the military or a committee of dictatorships that are responsible for the development of any country you can ever talk about. So you don't need democracy to develop. In fact, democracy seems to be a sufficient reason for countries to decay, for developed countries to decay. There have been more democracies that have decayed into poverty than dictatorships in the world.
Expand on that a little.
Tell me any country that you say it is developed, and let's trace when it developed. Even yours truly, America. America cannot claim to have ever been democratic when it had slaves. So the fact that it developed under the backs of slaves means that it wasn't a democracy. Look at Europe. Tell me any country that developed when it wasn't doing it at the backs of some people it considered not equal, because most basic tenets Democracy is equality of people. Don't even go there to say equality of citizens, because citizens is just a political definition. There is not a single country that ever developed as a democracy. In fact, and especially for somebody like you who fancies just reading for the sake of it, even the origin of democracy itself among the Greeks, it was still an elitist thing that was meant to be for male, mostly white, Caucasian, and propertied. People who did not fit that definition were never involved in the affairs of the city state.
I understand. I understand. That makes a lot of sense. So, are you saying that the democratic menu and its unavailability is actually a, a positive thing for Burkina Faso?
I don't think I can say yes or no, because remember now what we are having today. It's not an original condition. Burkina Faso is not anywhere that any of the developed countries was, because Burkina Faso is still a colonial territory, a former colonial. So maybe it suffers from a double jeopardy of having been its people having been enslaved, and since secondly having been colonized, and now even thirdly a neo-colonial state. So all these things factor into what it can be. So now, unless we can go back in time or probably eliminate any of these tentacles of neo-colonialism, even what the current leaders are trying to do, they are still trying to do it under the threat, under the challenges of neo-colonialism. And neo-colonialism definitely doesn't want them to succeed. So unlike the developed countries that did it by simply looting and stealing wealth of every other country, such that even when they were not efficient managers of resources, they had plenty of it. African countries do not have that luxury. And therefore, what they can be is still a function of an equal and unfair international system that probably has already predisposed them to what they can be. Unless they do what they have started doing, just reversing migration and reversing exploration and getting many of the Africans into the cities of the developed countries and causing problems that might make them rethink of keeping these countries, there might be nothing that they can do, even given the best intentions, even that which we are calling that democratic menu. Even if Burkina Faso or any other African country was to have exactly what America and the other Western European countries that claim to be democratic have, even if they had all that, the result would be still very different.
Wow. Wow. That's very heavy to unpack. Um, are you saying that, just to recap, are you saying that this quote unquote democratic menu, right, is a hindrance that is only put in play after a certain um, a certain level of progress has been placed?
Democracy is a product. It's not an original condition. It's not an end result. It is a product of something. And it is just a phase in development. And probably it is not even the best. that one can aspire to be. Why is it that why is it that we don't have CEOs of any Fortune 500 companies relying on votes and voting to make decisions about the progress and the success of the companies? Why is it that we know it is such a bad idea when it comes to businesses and making profit, but we think it is good when we are running a country? There is absolutely nothing good that can come out of democracy. Nothing.
Where did our infatuation with democracy come from? Where do you, and why do you think we were taught, especially my generation, to embrace it as such a positive ideal, rather than, looking at other ideals? And if democracy is not this positive thing from your perspective, um, what political system, if there is one, is superior to it?
Let's go systematically. Ask the first question and just ask one. Don't ask two.
All right. Um, what? Why were we taught to view democracy as positive? Um, and how
Because
does?
you're,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. How?
because
Mhm.
because your generation is the laziest, the most gullible, and it is the probably the most ignorant of them all. It doesn't even know how to write. It is now going back to short texts, which are completely meaningless. All the other generations tried to standardize a language. Your generation hardly knows any language. It hardly can communicate in a manner that other generations can understand. So it is possible for you to be lied to and you will just accept because you can't think for yourself, sorry to say.
I understand. However, the same could be said about other political systems. Are these other political systems employing the same strategies that democracy does to get their people to accept that political system?
When you say these other political systems, what are you referring to?
I'm referring to, it's diametric opposite, allegedly, which would be communism. The various branches, whether it be democratic socialism, um, uh,
Who said these are
monarchies,
different?
right?
Who said these are different?
Well,
Think of America.
mhm,
It is the greatest socialist state that has ever existed. Look at just the welfare system.
mhm.
It is the only it is the only country in the world where the poor are guaranteed a certain standard of living. No other country does that. How can we then say it is not a socialist one? Especially if we define socialism the way they do. America is the biggest welfare state in the world. So this is what I mean about your generation being the most gullible. You are being told exactly what you are not. And you are being lied to. Those that are not are what they say they are. And America is not a democracy. Even the most basic.
Hey, I'm sorry. You're cutting out, so I'm gonna need you to try and find a place where you got better signal.
Has it just started now or it was even before?
No, you're good now. I can hear you now.
So where do we
You said
start?
America is not a democracy?
It's not a democracy. Even the most basic thing like electing your leaders directly.
Hmm.
America doesn't even elect the president directly.
Hmm.
It elects through proxy called an electoral college.
Yeah.
And nobody elects the electors. That is the irony of it.
Yeah.
the major tenet of democracy, majoritarianism, however you define it, America is not a place where the majority rule. Otherwise, we would have had a president called Hillary Clinton because got the most of the votes.
So if democracy is majority rule, you're saying democracy in its essence as majority rule is incorrect, and also America is not a democracy.
I'm saying if we are defining democracy as that, number one, where citizens have equality of votes, that one man, one woman, one vote, America is not. I am also saying that if you look at democracy as majoritarian rule, America is not. If you talk of democracy as a place where people elect their leaders, in a sense directly, or through people they have elected, America is not. Because if you look at the electoral college, who elects the electorate, the electoral college? Nobody.
I understand. So
you are just engaged in an exercise in futility or just routine under the guise of the best democracy, but technically your votes are completely useless.
no, I understand that concept and that reality, right? I'm saying, is the concept, if democracy was applied properly in its essence, would it still be as negative as you say, or would it?
Yes.
Why? And that's not what I
Especially,
want to know, is why.
You've read a book about what is wrong in the world, just the amount of stupidity there is in the world. There is absolutely no way that an outcome that is determined by the most stupid, by the most ignorant, by the most outrageous people can lead to either, number one, a functional society or even a prosperous society, knowing the essence of man. A man is just a consumer. Given an opportunity, they will do nothing. They will just wait to enjoy the benefits. So we know the majority and the way they behave. So anything that is driven by the majority will be exactly it. A mob justice, mob thinking, and mob stupidity.
I see.
And look at America today. Look at America today. With all the geniuses there is, with all the youth who are now the ones driving the modern economy, you have two people that the best they can say is that I'm still with my faculties. I don't want to say they are both senile, but they are heading there. So imagine a situation where now those are the ones that will lead the free world. How much longer can it be free if the leaders can't even spell that freedom?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. That makes a lot of sense.
So that is what you get with democracy. It is a regression.
So you think that the people, because you said that dictatorship, right, is the way out, right? So you believe that democracy ends up becoming mob justice. Do you think that a dictatorship, which would be the leadership of one man versus the leadership of most men, do you believe that the factors that, one man will subject a people to are better than what a mob would subject a people to?
Let's just go by simple logic.
All right.
One person is likely to be a genius. There is absolutely no way the majority will ever be geniuses. So we are likely to get one man who knows or one woman who knows what needs to be done and with the will to do it. And that is how, by accident or probably by technically by accident, some countries have been able to develop, but under dictatorship. Even an accident to have a democracy develop has not occurred because there is absolutely no way the majority will ever have whatever it takes to lead towards one path that is not anarchy. And that is why they say democracy and anarchy are just feet away. As long as you are moving towards anarchy, that is the opposite direction of development.
With that being said, how do we gauge and or what would you say is a good metric to measure whether or not Ibrahim Traore is that leader that can lead Burkina Faso away from anarchy?
I mean, number one, the fact that he was able to stage a coup means that he has some ideas on how to do a few things. So that is good in itself. The second thing is, can he amass enough powers? Can he amass enough authority also stemming from the people? Because remember, even the so-called dictator you want to talk about must be supported by the people. And that is not a contradiction. So you need authority from the people to do what you are doing. And the people will always support you as long as you are giving them benefits. Convince them that you know what you are doing. Convince them that you are being better than what you overthrew. You will get their support. You will get their authority. Silence your opponents. And especially if it is opponents that you are convinced they don't know what they are doing. Because if again you are not able to silence your opponents, then how can you lead? The good thing about dictatorships is that when they know what needs to be done, they do away with all the dissenting voices and they are able to get to where they are going faster. The problem is if you cannot overpower your opponents and then your opponents give an alternative and that alternative gets supported, so you find you are just engaged in an exercise of pulling and pushing, not an exercise of leading and leadership. If you are a leader that people cannot follow, then you are not a leader. A good leader, whether dictatorial or otherwise, is the one who has the authority of the people, such that when they say, let's do it this way, let's go this place, they trust him enough to follow him. The reason why democracy is doomed to failure is because democracy never has one direction. There is always an equal but opposite direction. And democracy is just engaged in just pushing and pulling and howling, and they just stagnate. Or like a dog chasing its tail, they just go around in circles. But a dictatorship, that is a true dictatorship, where the leader knows exactly what needs to be done and he has the power to do it, can lead in one direction that people will follow.
I see. That's a very, very interesting explanation, but a very thorough one and logically sound one nonetheless. I with that in mind, right? I'm now thinking about the other elements of this leadership, right? If one finds himself trying to capture the people, you mentioned about capturing the peasant. Why is it so essential for a leader like Ibrahim Traore to capture a peasant? And can you explain what that means before you answer that question?
No. Let me answer it, and then in the process, we'll discuss about it.
Okay, go ahead. Free for all.
You see, the starting point is basic. If you cannot feed yourself, you have no right to engage in anything other than an exercise to feed yourself. If you cannot clothe yourself and you don't know how to do it. Anybody who forces you to do things that will make you feed yourself, clothe yourself, shelter yourself is somebody who is doing you a favor. So if Traore can make everybody else forget everything, including their God, including their religion, to make them to go to work and to make them do something that is beneficial to them, even to the nation. But it can be good for them and then it becomes bad for the nation. So as long as it can make them go to work, as long as it can make them even forget this thing you're calling voting, democracy has never fed anybody. But going to work feeds you. So if we can capture them and redirect them, in fact, even by force, if you cannot feed yourself, work until you die, the outcome of it will be more positive than any other mechanism. And that is what I would say capturing the peasants are. Peasants are people that are defined by assuming that they have no agency. The agency is either a government. So when they are poor, they call the government to come and feed them. As if a government has any farms, it has any industry, it doesn't have any. A person is one who is defined by assuming they have no agency, and therefore the only agency they have is one they have created of a God that feeds them, that tells them not to worry about this life because there is an afterlife. Anybody who is thinking like that is a peasant.
So capturing the
So
peasant
if
is
you
about
can,
getting them to go to work.
getting them to do something beneficial.
I see.
And that something beneficial is not waiting for a government, is not waiting for a God.
Wow.
Otherwise, if they are so serious about heaven or whatever else they go, then we should just kill them so that they get to heaven faster. But if you tried that, they will tell you we don't want to go, meaning that even that which they keep on saying, they don't believe in it. I want to see somebody who tells me heaven is so good, and then we go to fight, and they are in the front because they want somebody to kill them to get to heaven. That I can believe. They are all running away, even the priests, even the pastors. That
Wow.
is the definition of a peasant.
Mhm.
And capturing them is now exposing these ridiculous contradictions in their lives. They talk of how nice heaven is, but nobody wants to go there. It is not by surprise that probably some of the most corrupt countries are also the countries where everybody belongs to a religious organization. Where did we get that God who is that corrupt or who loves those corrupt ones?
I see. That's that's something that most people wouldn't define peasantry as, right? And that operating definition, you always told me operating definitions are important, but I felt like it was important to clarify the operating definition of a peasant as someone who believes their solution will come from a government or a god, right? And that is
Somebody who believes
Mhm.
somebody who believes that their agency is not as important as the external one.
I see. I see. Okay. Okay. So you have to do you force them to act on agency they don't believe in, or do you get them to believe in an agency?
That is now what capturing is.
Mm.
The one who talks about God and the one who wants to go to heaven, dispatch him there faster. And when he recedes, then you tell him what else he needs to do. Because he has just proven that he doesn't believe in what he is talking about. The one who wants to go there, help him to get there faster. And then when he comes back, he'll tell us how good it was.
So you're not forcing them to any direct action. You're forcing them to confront their belief first.
Exactly. I'm just telling them, if you think eating is good, you must do that which gives you food. If you believe clothing yourself is good, do that which clothes you. If you believe the afterlife is better than the one that is here, we dispatch you there.
Okay. What do we need to wait and see for as an indication that Traore is making progress? What are good indications that he's capturing the peasant? What are some things that you would look at as an analyst and as a professor, if you were teaching this development um, map of Burkina Faso?
You see, I think we are missing the point by approaching it that way. Traore is faced with so many challenges, such that even when he is succeeding, the forces that say he has no idea of what he's doing will be louder than those that will be saying he knows what he was doing. The question is, who will you listen to? Who will give you that yardstick you are asking me for?
Wow. So he is essentially creating the yardstick then.
He is creating the yardstick, and as long as he has the loudest mouth, which I doubt whether he will have, him being considered successful or not successful will still be the function of his destructors, the same forces that have held the country in bondage for almost a century.
Speaking of bondage,
Remember,
right?
by design, Africa is not meant to develop.
Yeah.
Africa is like that consumer who is just left on life support so that he can just consume
or donate.
You see, if he dies, then there are industries that will collapse.
Yeah.
But he can never be allowed to be strong enough to develop his own industries or an alternative source. So that is still where we are.
And that's an interesting take, because this guy Eric Prince directly stated that Africa needs to be recolonized, right? And that they should quote unquote put on their imperialist hat, right? Put back on their imperialist hat to recolonize Africa, because they're incapable of governing themselves and they are tired of being invaded. And my first reaction was like, invaded by who? Like, right? Invaded by who? One, two, how are we incapable of governing ourselves when, even without the level of interference that that the West has put to Africa comparatively, right? Even when America was the age that most African countries are, it was incapable of governing itself. And you stated earlier something that was funny, but go ahead and touch on that. As we link into it.
Are we talking of America governing itself?
No, it was America? Just his perspective. Like, Africa's incapable of governing themselves. And I think he's coming from the perspective like, we know better, right? Us as imperialists know better when it comes to governance, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
But my question is, how is, let's even take America, the current America today, how can you say it is governing itself? It is unable to pass a budget. It is unable even to determine. It is unable even to determine whether a woman can determine what she does with her body. It is unable to do that. Either way, America is unable to control its guns in the streets. In fact, and I'm in Philadelphia. Is there any government in any level of government in Philadelphia? They drive like they are in a fourth world country. In fact, I've been to third world, the so-called third world countries, and at least I've seen some order. Even India itself, where you hoot, and the one who hoots first has a right of way, that is a more organized system than the one there is in Philadelphia. Have you gone to a place like Kensington, where Homo erectors have ended in Kensington? No, there is no upright man. Everybody has started slouching like they are going back.
He said Homo erectus is extinct because they're slouching. That's
Exactly. Now,
heroin, man.
in Kensington, you can't talk of man being Homo erectus. And this is happening in every American city.
Mm-hmm.
You started by asking
here's a
about
clarification though. Here's a clarification. He stated that Africans and African countries were unable to benefit their own citizens, right? And from and here to play devil's advocate, right? From an infrastructure perspective, someone could say that's why you immigrated here, right?
No, infrastructure for what? To pollute? Infrastructure. Have you been to Michigan?
Yeah.
The entire Michigan water is polluted. It's all chemical by agencies that are authorized by the government to do it.
Okay, well, let me be more specific. I mean systemic infrastructure, not necessarily physical infrastructure, but systemic infrastructure, right? To make a welfare state, you still have to have a successful, transaction between government funds and people for it to be a welfare state, right? So in 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 a in an argument that you could argue that that is a beneficial, placement for its people. Also, uh, response for healthcare, um, access to healthcare, arguable. There's far, better countries for in that manner.
Are you talking of which healthcare are you talking about? Where oxycontin was given to almost everybody?
Mm-hmm.
And now we have cities that are completely dysfunctional because of legitimate use of drugs, where doctors act worse than street peddlers, where actually a doctor prescribes a medication you don't need for the sole purpose of addicting you so that you become a consumer. And that is deliberately done to addict you. That you want to tell me it is a system that cares for the welfare of its people better than the African one? I would rather be in an African country than being in a place where I go to see the doctor and I'm likely to be more addicted from my interaction with the doctor than my addiction with the local drug dealer.
So, do you think his statement is true? What would you what would you respond to him from his sentiments? Because I noticed this, right? I noticed
he's just a fool because he doesn't know what colonialism, what imperialism was or is. If he thinks imperialism ended, then he's a bigger fool than the worst student there is.
No. I think he knows that, right? But I think he means in an overt fashion because now colonialism has a black face, right? And so what he's saying is that it should return to its white face, right? But again, I was gonna say, right?
But the white face is even unable to make America great again in its own territory. How does it even expand?
No, I know. But again, remember, you're responding because you understand and actually care about the level of absurdity that he's speaking from. But before we even dive into the actual topic of that, there's a pervading there's a pervading sentiment among a lot of imperialists that they know best and that they know and own the validity of knowledge, the validity of um you know the of statehood, of the peak of standards. They feel as though they own uh this element and that only they are fit to rule, right? And Africa has
Well,
dealt with that for a long time. um how would you how do you get a white person, right, who believes that they should rule, to the same way you have to capture the peasant to get them to question their beliefs? How do you get an imperialist like, you know, like Eric Prince to question his beliefs the same way you would get a peasant to question his? Because on one end, someone like Traore would have an enemy in the peasants, as well as the enemies that he forged within his country, and then he'll have the enemy of, someone who may have far more money than a peasant but is still a peasant in the sense that they believe in their beliefs the same way a peasant does, right? So he has to
yep.
capture two separate audiences. How does one do that, right? You mentioned one, which was the domestic peasant. How do you capture the foreign peasant that is against you?
Clap for him. Just clap for him. Tell him to do it. Tell Prince to go ahead. Tell him, encourage him. In fact, provide him with the chartered planes to do it. Encourage him to have the most sophisticated and the fastest ships to reach there faster.
Why?
That is when he realizes that by the time he gets there, he's so outnumbered that when he gets there, he can't do anything. He just surrenders.
Mm.
The white man is so scared of their existence today. And that is why even in America, where they still think it's a white country, they are still making it white again. And the question is, how do they make it white again when even their genetic pool is the weakest? It is a foregone conclusion.
Again,
If there was any era of the white person, it is gone and gone completely. It will never come back.
it's on one argument you can say, it's a genetic weakness, right? But on the other end, if you are the, military and political hegemon, is that weakness or is that strength?
You see, hegemon where? We are just seeing now the Soviet Union or Russia
Mhm.
thought it was going to overrun Ukraine because of the differences, the asymmetry in its military power, asymmetry even in the
I'm sorry,
numbers.
asymmetry.
Yes,
Got
asymmetry,
you, got you.
yes.
Uh-huh.
So it thought that it would just overrun it. But now we are getting to find, no, it is not that easy. And this is a neighbor. Think of where the white supremacist has to go before he can be able to recolonize. Think of what he will need. And remember, you are not. We are not talking of somebody just bombing buildings. We are talking about somebody exerting their influence over others, meaning that you must have actual physical contact with them. Where will we get all those white people to do this? It is impossible. They are already engaged in an existential fight just to preserve their own. Why would they want to risk to go to a place where, at best, their whiteness will be polluted?
Mm.
They can only survive through isolation, not through integration. So imperialism will be the last thing that any of them with the brains, with still the genetic pool that has brains, will advise them.
So then, in this case, right? Because of the influx of immigrants, both legal and illegal, in Western countries, when Eric Prince says they're invading us, that's what a lot of supremacists believe, is that nonviolent immigration is you know an invasion, right? Even though they actually violently invaded, years before they enforced borders, right? Hundreds of years before they enforced borders. Um, why do you think that a lot of Western countries look at uh, immigrants as invaders?
I think let's connect this with what we started with, and you see the irony of it.
Mm-hmm.
They want us to do and to ape them and to copy them when it comes to democracy.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't want us to take the exact route they took towards where they are. They started by that exploration. They started by going to other territories. They started by visiting other territories, finding the other territories had more resources and taking advantage of them. What they are calling illegal immigration or illegal migration is exactly us doing exactly what they did, but they have a problem with that.
Mm.
So this is us trying to get to where they were, and I don't see anything wrong with it.
I understand.
And they will not stop us.
I understand.
So instead of thinking about recolonization, let them just design a way of preventing this migration from getting to their cities.
So you said that they can't stop us, right?
They cannot.
we we do not have military advantage. We don't have technological advantage. Why do you have that sentiment that we can't be stopped?
Do you remember reading anything about the Great Wall of China?
Yes, I remember what
Do you know what
Napoleon
it,
said:
do you know what it was built to do?
to keep people in and keep people out.
Do you know since it was built how many times China had been successfully invaded?
Um,
More than 4 times.
yeah.
And all the times they entered through legitimate doors
Hmm.
and legitimate gates. People opened the gates for them.
Hmm.
So you don't need a military to conquer.
Hmm.
You don't need to see the advancement in their weaponry and imagine that will be a deterrent for somebody who is just walking across a border that is guarded by an overworked and underpaid officer. A border that is thousands and hundreds of thousands of miles, and it is guarded by less than 1,000 people. Whatever technology you employ, they will still find their way in. The same way, when they had not invented any advanced technology for transportation,
Hmm.
their explorers were able to go all the way to wherever they wanted to go. That is exactly the same will that the Africans and anybody else in the third world will get to their advanced cities. It is exactly the same will. The
Hmm.
only difference being that ours are more educated. They have at their disposal more advanced systems and means of communication and support than they had when they did it.
What's the time frame for this changing the tides, right? Again, just to get back to that conversation of indications, right? We're at this hour mark, right? Before we close out, uh what are some things we should be looking at that are determinants of trajectories, right? For
This
example,
is one of it.
okay, go ahead.
Let's start with America and your democracy. Chances are that, depending on how the elections go this November, there might be a civil war in America. You might be surprised to find yourself running to be protected by Traore. That is a possibility.
People thought that last election as well.
Yeah, but I'm just saying the possibility is there.
I see.
But you see what we are talking about? We are talking of a possibility of Traore succeeding. But we are talking of the possibility of America descending into anarchy. That should tell you the trajectory. Whether we are talking about 100 years, Africa is likely to be in a better position than America. America is going down. The developed world is going down. Africa is rising. Add that to global warming and climate change, you are likely to find that being an advantage to Africa than it is to the developed world. So whether we are talking, whether we are predicting the future, I would say probably in the next 50 years, I will be running towards Africa. And as I always say, yours will be the first generation that will be struggling to go to Africa, the same way my generation was struggling to come to the developed world.
Wow. Wow.
So let's have this conversation 30 years to come, and you'll see how true it will be. That you'll be trying to get a citizenship of Kenya, of Tanzania, of Liberia, even when you are carrying an American passport.
Right. Right. You know, a friend of mine, actually, I think he's in the chat. Shout out Kiam, right? A friend of mine was telling me about how World War III is actually going to involve Africa heavily, right? How can this future or what does this future look like, right? If there is going to be such serious pull for China, Russia, and the United States to have control over, even France, control over various aspects of Africa. How does this look like if militarily it's such a great strategic position for these world powers? And currently, they don't have the military capability to face them. What does World War III look like? Now you have Iran attacking and Russia giving support to African countries, even though they need, they need all the things they can get, because them and China have vowed to back Iran if the United States gets involved, right? And so we're seeing an escalation, right? Where is it?
I'm telling you, your generation is too lazy to even have a world war. It cannot happen. It will not be a military one. It will be financial. It will be one that your generation can do at the safety of your computers, because you'll be too lazy to go and fight. There will never be another great generation that will have fought a world war. It has died. So if you are thinking in terms of military, absolutely no. And this is why you find Iran, even with fairly advanced weaponry, had to send chameleons and snails of missiles towards Israel that will take a whopping 10 hours to reach there. So that meanwhile is telling them, just see, I'm just sending you some little toys which I know you are going to intercept because technically I was not attacking you. I am just trying to convince my, again, very naive citizens, peasants, you call them, that I'm doing something to defend them. Meanwhile, they are sending emissaries and telling them, please don't attack us. Even if you are to attack us, just attack a military base that will have evacuated, because I know you are doing the same to your people. That is exactly what they are doing.
So you are actually not afraid of psychopaths and nuclear war buttons?
No.
Why not? You're not afraid of that? You don't think they're crazy enough? If they're crazy enough to colonize the habitable world, you don't think they're crazy enough to destroy it?
No.
Why?
They are too lazy. Sometimes they might not even remember the combination of the bombs. And now they are so lazy that now we have all these bombs in the hands of artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is going to tell you that it is not to their own interest to destroy itself. At least that is more intelligent than the human intelligence.
Right.
So these buttons now have already been given to robots. And the robots have already been programmed. At the worst, just don't detonate. At worst, just don't switch the button. So we already know that it cannot happen. And secondly, we already know that it can be recalled.
Cap, we got some people in the comments who disagree, right? Some people in the comments are saying that they're hitting military bases to spread out the front lines so that I'm sorry?
You see, now that is the futility of it. If you have nuclear warheads that can reach any part of the world, why do you need to station military anywhere? You can reach any part from the safety of your home.
Well, the notion is that after the Cold War, right? And honestly, as well as after Japan, they decided that these weapons were last resort warfare weapons because of their destructive capacity. And since then, the destructive capacity has only increased by almost 50 times in some instances. And countries refrain from using these as a primary source of warfare because they risk the quote unquote mutually assured destruction in which there would be no survivors anyways, right? And so they resort back to typical fighting. And now, although the you're right, the in-person fighting has gone down significantly, drones are heavily used on the people that are deployed, on the soldiers that are deployed. Drones are a serious asset, and they just drop small scale bombs to create enough destruction that they can input their influence. However, these large scale bombs have been bolstered for a longer period of time. So I get what you're saying, but they still need these smaller scales of military investment because they can't just destroy everything, but they just want the option to destroy everything, right?
No. You are mistaking an economic decision, a financial decision for a military one. All these militaries that are being stationed wherever they are being stationed, they are salesmen and saleswomen. Yes, they are going to introduce these weapons to remote places. They are going to create demand for it, but they are not a fighting force. These drones that are there, the same thing. You are selling the drone, but the drone is not giving you any more advantage than anything else. Other than the fact that now you are dealing, I've just said they are cowardly. You'll never find another great generation ever,
Mhm.
because even the military guys are afraid of dying.
Mhm.
You remember during the time of the great fighters, the greatest men are the ones who died in the battlefield.
Mhm.
Your generation has changed. The best fighters are the ones who live to fight another day. They are afraid of the outcome for which they were recruited for, to die for the country, to die for the others. But now they are afraid of it. This is why you find now, rather than the military being directed by a commander in chief, the military is commanded by CEOs of the so-called industrial military complex, and
Yeah.
now which is industrial military and technological complex.
And
So
the
these are.
intelligence community for sure.
But now the intelligence, now you want to tell me there is any human intelligence left when humans are relying to artificial intelligence?
Yes. Yes. The intelligence community is, because remember, AI still has programmers, right? And
Yeah.
until artificial intelligence has a physical majority, it's not a problem right now, right? It's not a problem. Um it the when it comes to the intelligence, because again, I want to keep this in the context of, you know, recolonizing Africa due to lack of governance, right? Someone like Traore, you spoke of the economic hitmen and the jackals that come in for those who don't um bow down to Western interest, right? How does someone like Traore, who does not have nuclear weapons or that um or any form of challenge to the West, how does someone like him keep a colonizer who wants to come take over at bay? How does someone like him prevent uh, this neo-colonialism from re-entering his country? Right?
Well, he has the advantage of having been colonized by the French. The French, they are the underbelly of Europe. They are the weaklings of Europe. So they are the weakest. So
They
if
have
there
the
is
fourth.
anybody
They
who
have the
would,
fourth largest gold reserve in the world.
because they have just looted it from Africa.
But that's what I'm saying, is that regardless of where they got it from, right? I look at
But
it now as they have it now, whether or not
yeah,
we're
but you
going
are
to get
forgetting.
it, but they have it now, right?
But you are forgetting. You are forgetting that they are the flower girls in a wedding. They are the ones who are afraid of getting
Hands dirty.
their gowns dirty. You remember about liberté, égalité,
Hmm.
and equalité.
Hmm.
They still want to perpetuate to be the country of liberty.
Hmm.
So you cannot be the country of liberty and do what you are doing. So the moment Traore starts exposing the underbelly of the French,
Hmm.
they are likely to react in a way that will prevent their wedding gowns from getting dirty.
Yeah.
And that is an advantage for him.
Yeah.
Expose it, have the loudest mouth. Don't even fight. Just expose them and take advantage of what they have.
Hmm.
Sue more in French country. Sue in the European Union. Sue to have many of these things coming. Traore might leave before the suits are completed, but
Yeah.
what you will have started will, as time passes, tell us that he knew what he was doing. This is the time to have a new beginning. And while the new beginning takes advantages of the weaknesses of democracy,
Hmm.
democracy cannot provide that template for future.
Wow. Wow. So there are so many questions about, the future that cannot be answered right now because
Mhm.
Africa has literally never been in this position before.
Which position is that?
The position of general consensus of dislike for neocolonialism to the point
Mhm.
where someone like Traore isn't already dead. Right?
Yep.
Because again, I realize that part of this pervading theme here is that Western countries need the peasants to be disillusioned for their power to continue because that's the only way they're not going to rise, right? Um
No, no, no. Actually, that might not be true. Look at
Explain.
the house of Saudi. Look at the house of Saudi. It just knows what it cannot touch. As long as it sells its oil in the dollar, as long as it doesn't challenge the petrodollar, it is able to survive. And it is able to survive with minimal interference. So if Gaddafi had realized the same, and if Gaddafi had just played a little bit longer the game of the petrodollar, if now was the time he was in power, where now we see a strong China mapping a different path, a strong and adventurous Russia mapping another one, a strengthened North Korea doing it. You see, now this would have been the time for somebody who is adventurous to have done something with minimal negative outcomes. At least, if now this was the time that Gaddafi was doing what he was doing and Saddam Hussein were doing what there is, they could have gone to hide in the Kremlin, or they could have just gone and hidden in some place in Guangzhou, or even just hidden behind the Great Wall. And they would not have been reached there by an American bomb. So I think I can equate them to the Steve Bikos in South Africa, the ones who confronted the apartheid system a little bit earlier before their stars had aligned against it.
They struck prematurely.
Yes, they struck prematurely. So this is the same with that. But what is now happening, America must fall. Whether once it falls, it is the China that takes over, is a different story, because China is not behaving any different from the other imperialists.
China
So
was an
it will be,
imperialist. China was an imperial state for a very long time. It just was
it
before
still is.
modern nations, right? But China was a
Exactly.
serious force. Whether you want to go with the Ottomans, whether you want to go with the Chinese, like it doesn't matter. They had serious force. Even Napoleon didn't want to smoke with the Chinese. Napoleon was like, beyond that wall is a sleeping giant. And when they wake up, the whole world is going to tremble, right? And, nobody wanted smoke with China. So I think China is a country that gets left out of the imperialist conversation a lot. But very few people realize their involvement even in the trans-Saharan slave trade, right? The slave trade of East Africans across the Indian Ocean, right? A lot of the Chinese and even the Japanese, they got so much from that era, right? And so it's interesting to see these world powers at play because each one of them had a particular hand in enslaving Africans, sub-Saharan Africans to be exact, right? The Chinese, the Arabs, the Europeans, right? And the Japanese as well, right? But this particular power play that you're seeing among the imperialists, do you believe that they're just going to destroy themselves and Africa is gonna, uh, build from the ruins, or do you believe Africa is completely separate, just developing itself regardless of what is happening outside? Do you believe we can remain proverbially Switzerland, right?
No, no, no. It's not going to destroy itself, and we are not going to stand idle and just watch. We are going to help them destroy themselves. We have just given them an Obama. We have just given the UK Sunak. In fact, yesterday, depending on the time zone you are in, we just gave, I think it is Northern Ireland, it's a Zambian president. Australia has a Kenyan lady senator. So, whether you want to believe it or not, the white race is retrogressing,
Mm-hmm.
and Africa is on the rise. Remember, development is always brought by foreigners.
Mm.
So, the African natives might not be able to get us to where we want to go. But with these people that we had sent out, the moment they start coming back, the moment they continue sending all these monies they are sending, they are going to take over important sectors of the economy and of administration that we are going to get there.
Wow. So that there's a bit of a confusion here, and this is what I'm gonna end with. Pops, it's been great, and this has been an excellent episode. But something I'm confused about is, if democracy isn't the answer, then why would taking these offices simply be for the purpose of destruction, or would they be to actually hand over systems that are already fulfilling purposes and are already working?
No, 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 you've mixed oranges and balls and you want to call them fruits just because they are both roundish. There's no connection between those two things that you've conflated.
Okay.
You see, infiltrating a system
Mhm.
and you control it doesn't mean you become an instrument of what it stood for.
Mm.
Obama coming to America,
Mhm.
although his hands might have been tied by many things, had an impact on what blacks can be that nothing else would have given them. So just even the courage they had to start saying Black Lives Matter wouldn't have come without having seen that face to know actually it matters.
So you're saying morale.
And
Morale is actually everything.
it's more than just morale, it is a conviction. Conviction that almost borders on stupidity.
I see.
That you know you can do it. Like more or less like 50 Cent.
Mhm. Get
Let's
rich or
get
die
the
trying.
power or die trying.
Yeah.
You see, that is the kind of thing an Obama gave the black race. We can be it. We can do it. And when they saw Floyd being done what he was done, they said enough is enough. And this is what you see driving young boys in the streets.
Mhm.
They know now because they have seen the police surrender. They know we can go with our ATVs and we can take over the roads. We can take over the roundabouts. We can take over the streets. What will the police do? We need to know a certain city X has 20,000 police officers. Let's have a congregation of 50,000. Even if every police officer arrests one person, there'll still be 30,000 to do what we wanted to do.
Mm.
This is conviction that is coming as a result of these things we never saw. Somebody seeing their color, their people being oppressed by a weak institution. And now they are mastering how do we overpower this system to demand what is rightly ours.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful, man. I thank you so much for your insight. Just to recap, you don't think we should be worried about people like Eric Prince then?
No, no, we should give, in fact, we should be inviting him to come and rule
Why? Because people
as
could
long
take
as
that
he
the wrong
brings
way, man. People could take that the wrong way. You know,
which
someone,
wrong way.
someone, someone could clip that and say that you are inviting an imperialist to come rule, right? Someone could clip
No,
that
no,
statement
just
of yours out
inviting
of
him
context.
to become an easier target.
I see.
Yeah, we'll kill him in the street even before he arrives, even before he knows where the seat of power is. We'll have eliminated him or made him a slave. We can use him to wipe our toilets with.
I see.
Yeah. Did you see what happened in Mogadishu?
No.
6 soldiers were paraded in the streets of Mogadishu, and the most powerful army in the world had to retreat because they cannot even stomach see 3 of theirs, 4 of theirs being killed and paraded. Yet these are people who have sent bombs to cities that were destroyed 3 quarters, but the people still survived.
Mm-hmm.
The people still resisted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I see. We will survive. We will still resist. I
Yeah,
see.
let them come. Let them come a second time, and now we are ready for them.
Yeah, man. Hey, that's been
Yep.
great. That's great, man. Next time we come, we're gonna dive into a little bit more current events. We're gonna get some more expert opinions as well, and we're just gonna keep talking about Traore. Uh, I want to also dive into some of the other aspects, right? So we've discussed war, but next time let's talk about maintaining state capacity, right? Because fighting a war is fine and dandy, but before, during, and after a war, you still have to maintain state capacity. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like, and how his allegiances with Mali are beneficial, or things we're not seeing. So next time we're going to dive into it a little bit more. This is Diaspora's episode 1. Thank everybody for being in the chat. Shout out Yusuf, shout out Kiam, shout out Munyambo. Right, we got Munyambo in the chat. Selena, thank you so much. Taya, thank you for coming in. And, it's been a great episode. I'm Victor Mutama, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.